All right, welcome everyone. My name is Erin Mihal. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started today, we have a few housekeeping announcements for today's session. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in the Learning Development webinars are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or its affiliates. The content provided in this program is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement by Emory University or the Emory Alumni Association. This session is being recorded, so please be sure to keep your microphones muted to avoid disruptions. Though we do encourage you to keep your camera on. We love seeing the faces. So if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to use the raise my hand feature, or we have the Q&A open, or you can even drop it in the chat. And we'll take your questions, and we will be saving some time at the end also. Now for the fun part, I'm so excited to introduce our featured speaker, Natalie Weister. Natalie is a bilingual human resources professional and learning development coach. She has a passion for supporting her clients connect to their innate creativity and purpose, maximizing their personal fulfillment, development strategies that enhance organizational culture and engagement. She holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from Emory University's Quezada Business School, and she is a certified global professional in human resources. In addition to her CPCC and her ACC credentials, she completed a diploma in ontological, that's a tongue twister for me, coaching from Ibero-American University in Mexico City. Natalie currently resides in Miami, Florida, and enjoys writing, traveling, and exploring the city's vibrant culinary scene. Please help me welcome Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to see you all on here. As Iram said, please put your cameras on if you are able to. I'd love to see your faces and know who I'm interacting with. We have such a diverse audience from all over the country, which I love. As she said, I am joining you from Miami, Florida. So if any of you are ever down in Miami, please look me up and would love to meet you in person. So on that note, I will share my screen and get us rolling here. And it's like it's up. Aaron, can you just give me a thumbs up? You can see my screen. Everyone, great.
Yeah.
And let me make sure I can see the chat. Okay. Wonderful. Well, we've done the intros, and I know we are midweek, which can feel heavy. So I want to get us over the hump and get us moving a little bit. We'll do a quick embodiment exercise to raise our energy. So those of you who are courageous enough to leave your cameras on, I appreciate it. I'm going to do this with you. If you don't feel comfortable or you're driving, don't do this. But this comes from, some of these moves come from an ancient practice called Qigong, which was developed in China thousands of years ago as part of traditional Chinese medicine. And it involves using exercises to optimize energy within the body, mind, and spirit with the goal of improving and maintaining health and well-being. So I'll invite you to just stand up. Don't worry about looking at any kind of way. Just stand up from your chair and just kind of put your feet in a wide stance, comfortable. Don't lock your knees, just relaxed, shoulders relaxed, no muscles clenching, and just start by taking 3 deep breaths into your belly. With your feet wide, we're just gonna get into our body for a minute because we are so much in our heads. All you smart Emory people, I relate to being stuck up here. So we're gonna just tap into the power of our body for a minute. And we're gonna start by just opening our arms up wide, coming around like a big circle, scooping the air up and then pushing it down. You just push it down. And as you do that, breathe in, take a big deep breath into your belly. And then exhale, pushing it down. And then one more in. We push it down. Now we'll do a quick move that is just arm swings. And it's just like a twist with a gentle tap. There's nothing to force. Just if you can think of that little drum toy. I don't know if any of you had this as a kid with the little arms and the balls that would hit the drum. That's kind of what as you twist it. And you're doing this, basically you're gently massaging your organs, and you're just getting loose and moving really intuitively, which we don't often do. And it's a really good way to just kind of open up some of the energy channels, the meridians in your body. Okay. And then the last one we're going to do, I do this every day, by the way. It's a great way to just get your energy up if you need a quick break in the middle of the day or in the morning. Just going to jump up and down and let your shoulders fall, your hands fall, keep your knees loose. And as you do it, you're going to breathe out your nose each time. So breathe in on the jump up, breathe out like this, and just let your arms fall by your side and get really, really loose. And you get that energy moving. As I said, you open up the energy channels in your body. And this is also a really great way to keep your lymphatic system moving, which is your natural detoxification system. So I hope you all are energized, ready to go. If you want to know more of these moves, reach out to me. Look up Qigong practices. It's just a phenomenal way to give yourself that burst and tap into your body, your breath, the things that we so often forget and that are part of our innate power as humans in these bodies. And we're going to talk more about that, and we'll connect this here. But now that you all are energized, I want to start with a story. So as a self-described high achiever, I always used to believe that the price of success was stress. From the time I woke up in the morning, my cortisol was on overdrive. As I quickly scanned the overwhelming amount of emails on my smartphone, I don't know if any of you can relate to this. Let me look for the biggest fire that I need to fight today. Or maybe that's at home with your family, with kids. And maybe this is because I started my career in a very stereotypically stressful and high pressure field in management consulting, or maybe that's just my wiring, but my frame of reference looked nothing like these Zen rocks that you're seeing on the screen. But interestingly, it was that same first stressful job that I just mentioned that I lost in the blink of an eye. My first job out of Emory, despite all I had invested physically, emotionally in 18 months of working there, graduating from this prestigious university with a job already teed up out of college, killing myself for 18 months. And I thought I was going in for a performance review meeting. And I actually left with my walking papers, with 2 weeks of pay, and was asked to collect my things and leave. It wasn't my fault, they told me. It was the difficult economic market that required making some difficult decisions. And I don't know if any of you lived through the 2008, 2009 economy, job market. That's what I'm referring to. But certainly we've all experienced challenges throughout our career. But I wish I could say I learned from that experience right out of college, and that I had immediately reconsidered the cost of my actions, which at the time I thought would make me successful and ultimately worthy. But unfortunately, I continued in similar patterns for many years. I didn't have many of the tools that I'm here to share and reinforce with you all today. And I know you're all here because you're already successful. For goodness sakes, you're Emory grads. You already know better than I do how hard work and dedication lead to great results. So I'm not out to show you that formula today. But what I am excited to offer you is a new framework, and one that mirrors the essence of this photo. Well, it's supposed to be a video. Let's see if I can get it rolling. Okay, there we got some movement. So even though it appears that these rocks could tip over at any moment amid this rushing water, somehow they remain standing and they have a foundation upon which to stay upright and solid amid this flowing water. Let's see if I can, there we go. Okay, before we dive further into our topic though, I'll quickly share the flow of our short hour together today. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your days and spending it with me. I know how valuable that is. First, we're going to examine why striving for balance is a losing proposition. Why it is that we make ourselves sick to some degree or another, trying to balance it all. And by the way, isn't the point of balance to actually feel better? Then I'll invite you to try on a new approach with some frameworks and tools to help. And finally, I'll share a little bit more about ways that I work with my clients to take these concepts deeper. And I'll take questions at the end, but that said, please feel free to raise your hands, have questions in the chat as we go, so I can address those. I really want this to be dynamic and interesting for you, not just talking at you. So please jump in at any point. So Iram already introduced me, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Natalie. I'm a leadership coach and a self-defined empowermenter, which is really this blend of coach, mentor, and guide on your journey to total empowerment as leaders of your lives. And I believe that you're all leaders of your lives, independent of what your jobs or your roles are. So I graduated from Emory in 2007, and I spent almost 14 years working in major corporations across sectors like media, tech, and hospitality as human resources and talent leadership development specialties, basically. So as I started to describe before in my story, I've had some warnings throughout my life and my career, one of which was landing in the hospital from stress. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a minute. But I do want to just tell you what the real pivotal point for me was. And the real wake-up call and big shift came when I lost my mom a couple of years ago. I watched cancer take everything from her that she cherished, including finally her life. And, you know, she lived what seemed like a healthy life. There was no family history of cancer, blame on genetics. And yet she told me before she passed away that she knew its source, and that was chronic stress. So while my resume and career path were impressive on the outside, I realized that I was on a trajectory to my own demise. While I could continue growing successfully, I was living in fight or flight, in this survival mode every single day, always trying to juggle all these balls and make everyone else the priority, everyone else happy, but myself. I felt like I had to be on call and respond immediately in order to succeed, starting at this young age. And between the celebration of hustle culture and this feeling of imposter syndrome that plagues so many of us, especially as we're starting out in our careers, for me, it led to a lack of boundaries. And then my health and my relationships really started to suffer. So all that to say, that is why I became a coach. Now, from the outside looking in, my calling is to support leaders and their teams to really rewrite the script, to become more conscious creators of their life experience instead of at the effect of circumstances in their demanding lives. So let's dive into why you're all here. Enough about me. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat. what do you all notice about these two definitions? The definition of balance versus the definition of harmony. What's the real key differentiator of these two words or concepts for you? Just pop some thoughts into the chat. Anyone? Quality versus arrangement. Balance looks like it's expecting a fall. Harmony prioritizes well-being. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for your contributions. My thoughts are that, balance is an external kind of judgment supported by some kind of physical effect, like a stimulus and a response, while harmony is more of an internal state. We're going to be looking a lot internally today. And obviously, there are many definitions of these two words depending on the context, but whichever ones that you hold, I do invite you to keep your mind open to new possibilities as we move through our time together today. The idea for this topic in particular actually came a few months ago when I was having coffee with a friend, and she was telling this story referencing priorities in life through this metaphor of juggling balls. And I learned later that this idea that I'm about to share with you was initially coined by Brian Dyson, who was the former CEO of Coca-Cola. Very appropriate for Atlanta Emory audience. Coincidence, totally, but it's a great one. His point was that we so often feel like we can't let any balls drop in our life between work, family, health, friends, spirituality, church, mindfulness practices. But actually, most of those balls are made of rubber, and only a select few, and I'd argue really only one, is made of glass. Which means that if it falls, it breaks. It doesn't bounce back. And that one glass ball is you. So think about how this lands for you, no pun intended. Which balls in your life are rubber, and that if you let them fall, they can bounce back, maybe not right away, but eventually. And which are made of glass and break into a million tiny pieces. Personally, I'll admit that until very recently, I've been so caught in this false trap that I could be someone who could somehow achieve that perfect balance or keep all these balls in the air until I couldn't. And this photo is really a representation of me. All the balls seem to be falling on my head. Aside from the story I shared about being laid off, I even landed myself in the hospital, literally so sick to my stomach that I was admitted for 3 days, unable to do anything besides really sit in my pain. So hopefully none of these difficult experiences have happened to you or will happen to you, but I share them to describe my story and what led me down this path of new possibilities and hopefully to inspire some of you. And I want to share some perspectives and tools for you to try on so that you can avoid similar consequences and ultimately just live your best lives. That's what we're all here for, right? So what happens when we juggle and everything is a priority? Well, first, nothing is a priority. Some things I commonly see and hear from clients, friends, family are feelings of dis-ease, which, as I'll share in a few minutes, we know leads to actual disease. At best, it might create feelings of overwhelm and burnout. And how does that actually impact your performance? Something else I see in here is that in trying to balance it all, it leads to a lack of any real connection to any of it. Our focus is never truly in the present where we are. So for you or for your teams, if you lead teams, that can lead to total disengagement, to turnover, or this latest buzzy phenomenon everyone's talking about, which is quiet quitting. And then another common feeling that I hear and see is lack of direction. Like there's no true reference point, no North Star, no compass. What does that mean? That attention is everywhere and nowhere. And this really stifles any significant forward movement towards making an impact, stifles creativity and innovation. So what's the common thread among all three of these symptoms or outcomes, if you want to call them that? Well, they trigger our primitive survival instincts to come online, like we're responding to a threat. One of my favorite authors and speakers, Dr. Joe Dispenza, says, we either live in survival or we live in creation. Like, think about that really. If you are in survival mode, you cannot create, you cannot innovate, you cannot alter your circumstances. You're fighting, fleeing, fawning, and really that's all you can do. You're reacting. So I'd like to pose a question, an inquiry for you to think about. You don't have to share openly, but take this inquiry with you. How is trying to survive suppressing your innate creativity? How is it suppressing your spark, your zest for life, moving towards a larger vision or purpose? A client said this to me the other week. I'm so stressed, trying to do it all. Why does it have to feel so hard? So many of us have this deeply ingrained belief, though, that it's supposed to be hard. And I think to some degree, this is generational and it's changing with younger generations. But it's like this badge of honor to move through the hard. The older I get, though, I realize that it doesn't actually have to be hard. That's a story that we've been conditioned by our society and culture to believe. We just need to shift our awareness and start to question some of those thoughts. Nothing changes in our life until we change. The external demands on our time and our attention will always exist in some form or another. So, as I said in the beginning of this, we're here to look inward, to examine what is it about me that needs to change, to take responsibility for being that creator of our own lives. So here I'd like to offer another idea, that stress can become an addiction. And all addiction is a habit of avoidance to some degree or another. The stress is the thing that we feel so that we don't feel other deeper things, other harder emotions. And when our default is always imagining or anticipating the negative or the hard, it produces these chemicals in our body. That experience of angst, of fear, of worry, that's all a chemical reaction. And our body doesn't actually know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And so our body experiences this as if it were already occurring. Just that thought and feeling, that stimulus and response is actually conditioning the body to become the body and mind of anxiety, of stress, of anger. We're literally programming ourselves by these habitual thought loops. And you keep doing that over time, it just becomes your personality, becomes part of who you are. Those hormones become very addictive, and pretty soon we start looking for conditions in our life to reaffirm that emotion. We need something in our life to fuel the negative feelings. And in a sense, we become addicted to a life that we don't even like. And most of this is just subconscious programming, right? But it's worth examining again and really taking away this inquiry of, where am I propagating some of these patterns that are showing up. You know, and science shows us that long-term exposure to hormones of stress downregulates genes and creates disease. So what does that mean? Our thoughts can literally make us sick. It's pretty powerful, right? So aside from getting caught in this cocktail of addictive hormones that become part of our identities, there's a few common stories that I see my clients tell themselves and others about this notion of balance. And certainly I don't say any of this without having personally thought and felt the same things. So I'm very compassionate as I describe these stories. But consider where you might fall into this. Consider if any of these are familiar to you. The first one is that this idea of balance is regarded as some kind of mythical or impossible state to achieve. That, okay, maybe a few people have mastered it, but it's only reserved for a select few perfect people out there. So the belief that's being reinforced there is that I'm just going to give up before I try. I'm hanging on by a thread. This is the way it is. And I'd argue that this isn't actually acceptance, it's denial, or a refusal to make the hard changes internally. The second story is more like a delay tactic. It's the story that if I just continue this grind without any massive disasters, for 1, 3, 5, 10 more years, then I can make a change. Then I can prioritize other things like myself, that glass ball. The problem with that is we don't have a guarantee of tomorrow. And what if living life this way is what's making us sick and robbing us of that possibility for tomorrow, of enjoying the quality of that time tomorrow? And the third story is this delusion that I'm doing it all. I'm checking all the boxes on the to-do list. It doesn't matter the quality at the expense of doing anything very well. Most importantly, I'd say at the expense of themselves. But at least they can say, I did it. This was definitely me. Check, check, check. I've got this gratification for checking all the boxes. Didn't really matter how amazing it was. It was done. I could say it was done. But in my personal experience, I realized that I wasn't actually taking any responsibility for priorities. When we're taking care of everything for everyone but ourselves, again, it's at the cost of ourselves. And that's not being selfless. That's being a martyr in some ways. And that's out of alignment with who we're truly here to be. Also, we're missing out on the experience and the depth of the present moment as we're always thinking about the 10 other things on our plate. So it's just this losing proposition. But never fear, there is another way. So now we're going to start getting into some of these tools and frameworks that I promised at the beginning. And I really want to encourage, if there's any questions as I'm talking through this, please raise your hand or pop anything into the chat. I'll start with another question. Have you ever considered that every single thing that we do is for a feeling? It's so that we'll feel a certain way, or the feeling that we think we're going to feel when we get the thing. Which is why we're going to take a look at what generates feelings. And this requires that as leaders, parents, partners, friends, whatever those principal roles are for your life, we train from the inside out. This is a principle that professional athletes have gotten right for a long time. I don't know if any of you have heard about the mental rehearsal that athletes have done, and athletes have had coaches forever for a reason. And it isn't just training on the field or the court, it's truly training their minds. That starts with understanding the mechanics of the mind-body connection. or the model of what shapes our reality. That's also why we started today doing exercises to get out of our brains and into our bodies, because actually the majority of the neurological signals that run between our brain and body starts from our body. 80% are these afferent neurons that move from the body to the brain. I'm going to get to what the C stands for, Margot. I'm going to jump right into this. I'll stop jabbering. So if we can get conscious of our thoughts and recognize that we have the power to change them, we can in turn change our feelings, actions, and ultimately the results in our lives. So to answer your question, this image, I'm showing you in very simple terms how circumstances, which is the C in this image, create certain thoughts, which can be conscious thoughts or unconscious thoughts. And that in turn generates certain emotions or feelings. And then it becomes this loop, this thought feeling loop that continues to happen until we don't even know the difference. And from that space, from that thought feeling loop that's happening without us even realizing it, usually, we take action. We take action often from an emotionally charged, non-logical or disempowered state, because we're assigning a meaning to the circumstances. That's what we are. We're meaning-making machines as humans. All circumstances are inherently neutral, even the worst of them. That doesn't make them right. I'm not, making an ethical statement here. It's just that we as human beings, with our endowment of our biology and of our consciousness, we assign meaning to circumstances. And so that meaning is the thought, the emotion that's generated this loop. We take action or non-action, which is also an action, and that creates our results. So any results or lack of results, things that we want for our life, can be traced back to something in this model. So if we want different results, we need to shift the focus from the external experience to the internal one. There's always going to be these external circumstances acting on us that are outside of our control. That's just part of walking around as humans in this world. But our end results can be directly traced back to the thoughts that we're having about those circumstances. That's where our power lies. Any questions on that before I move on? Anything? Okay.
All right.
So now that we know,
Margo,
oh
can
yeah,
I
hey
ask a
Margo.
question? Yeah.
Sure.
I appreciated that. I was just curious. So it sounded like it starts with the thoughts and then goes to the feelings, and I understand that they kind of work interchangeably, but if you're looking to start inside out, so to speak, you would focus on changing your thoughts, not feelings. Is that the idea?
Yeah, and yes, and I want to reinforce that there's feelings that are emotionally generated by a thought that we often don't even know the thought that's generating it. And then there's also an experience that we have as a result of a stimulus that is unchanging, that is consistent. So that might be something like a physical pain from a burn, or something that is just a biological response. It could also be an intuitive response. That's really where the feelings happen independent of the thought. But what I'm talking about is, yes, we want to change our results. We need to look at the thoughts that are creating an emotional reaction or an emotional response to circumstances. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
And it's easier said than done, right? I'm not here to say that this is, oh, just think a different thought. But what I am offering is a new degree of awareness and an empowering notion that, wait a minute, there's ways that I can actually question my thoughts. There are ways that I can consider what thought is actually happening versus just moving through this loop so quickly and reacting or responding. And yeah, it's never done, Hillary. You can focus on changing your thoughts and feelings, whichever you like. You're right. And it's all interconnected. And there's so many different modalities to do this, but it starts with awareness. It starts with awareness that actually I can question thoughts that I'm having, especially those that are so deeply ingrained, that are so subconsciously wired into us because we just keep on thinking the same thing without questioning them, and they're actually running our lives. So understanding to some degree the mechanics, the onus is on us to take radical responsibility for those thoughts. And that's really the definition of moving from victim consciousness to creator. And that's my work in the world, to go and prove to myself and ultimately link arms with all of you, with everybody who was interested in this, to become the creators of their lives, to take their power back. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and respect that there are absolutely victims in this world, and that is not to be taken lightly. That said, there are many, many situations that we continue to perpetuate this state of victimhood instead of taking charge of what is in our control. At a high level, and there's a lot in this image here, but at a high level, what you need to know about it is that there are 3 positions on this drama triangle. This has been around in the world of coaching psychology for a long time and adapted by different schools of thought, but it's called the drama triangle. And the 3 positions are hero, villain, and victim. And listen, we all play these roles in some capacity in our lives, but we do it because we're actually getting something positive from it. To give you an example, if I play the hero and swoop in to quote unquote rescue someone when they're feeling bad, maybe it's a good friend, they lost a pet and they're feeling terrible, they're crying, and I immediately jump to action and I start doing all of these things thinking I'm going to make it better for them, help get them out of that state. It's an opportunity and an invitation to actually look at, what are my motivations here? Am I really trying to help them, or am I trying to avoid my own discomfort around their emotions? Right? Like we project our emotional states onto others, and we feel the discomfort of others. And so the reaction there is often a protective one, an adaptive one. Similarly, if I'm blaming someone else for my circumstances, I'm at the effect of someone else, which is a super disempowered state. And it's on each of us individually to cultivate responsibility for our thoughts and feelings, which, as we saw in the prior slide, ultimately create our realities. And our imagination, from which we create anything and everything, is our endowment as humans. Cultivating that in business and in life in general is the key to high performance. So from the space of radical responsibility, we can evaluate with curiosity, not judgment, some of our existing paradigms or the beliefs and lenses through which we see the world. And we can start to redefine them to actually serve us. And this is bigger than just 1 or 2 thoughts. It's really taking a close look at what's the center of our lives, about getting honest, what's driving our decision making. So I want to just double click on this paradigm shift, and this is where we're going to start talking about this distinction between balance and harmony to bring this all together. If our thoughts can make us sick, like we talked about before, well, they can also make us well. As I said, thoughts that we keep on thinking over and over and over again just become beliefs. But nothing changes in our life until we change. And it takes so much energy, awareness, intention to disentangle from those program beliefs, which, by the way, is where coaching is so effective. And there are other modalities as well. I don't want to just, you know, say that coaching is the cure-all, but it's certainly a modality and an amazing support and container to start evaluating those paradigms, those beliefs. And what's so amazing is our human superpower of consciousness, of self-awareness, allows us to examine our maps for how we view the world. If we really want to, we get to choose the paradigms or the center based on unchanging values and principles versus this tempting allure of other centers that might look like work or family or possessions or friends or church, which, by the way, none of those things are bad things to hold as priorities in our lives. In fact, there's no judgment in any of this whatsoever, but if any one of those things is at the center, maybe it's work. I'll just use work because that's what it has been for me. And I've shared all of the stories leading up to this about my realization of how ineffective that was in supporting my overall well-being. If any one of those things is at the center, the invitation is to get curious and consider how it creates this inherent feeling of imbalance as you juggle all of these decisions that impact the other areas. Whatever is at the center of our life will inform these 4 interdependent life support factors, which I'd argue are the basis of a state of harmony. The first is security, the sense of worth, connection to our identity. It's our emotional anchorage. The second one is guidance, which is a source of direction in life, what governs the decision-making and doing. Then there's wisdom, which is our perspective on life, this perspective of an integrated wholeness that inherently exists in all things in nature. And the fourth is power, or the faculty to act, strength and the potency to accomplish anything. We need this power in order to take massive action, not just sit around and think about our thoughts all day. So when these 4 factors are present and coherent with our authentic center, we achieve a sense of harmony as an integrated individual living comprehensively. So I know this might sound a little complicated, and I'm going to break this down with a real example so that you can start to think about this and apply it in your own life. So say you invited your spouse, to a concert, and they're excited about your date. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you get a call from your boss. And your boss says, I need you to stay late at the office. We have an urgent request for a morning meeting. And you stop, right? You go, oh my gosh, I've got these plans. I have this date with my spouse. I've got to get back. If you're looking through a family or a partner-centered lens, your main concern will be your spouse. And it's very likely that you'll tell your boss, you know what, I can't stay. And you may feel like, ugh, my job's at risk if I make this choice. But your lens is your partner. Unfortunately, though, then you are going to be very likely anxious, uncomfortable, trying to justify your decision. And, and then ultimately you're not present. Again, you're not present in the moment with your spouse. If you're work-centered, you might be thinking of the opportunity to gain points with your boss and further your career. Oh, this is time for me to get my brownie points in, and my spouse will be proud of me. If you're pleasure-centered, you'll probably forget the work and go to the concert, even if your spouse would be very supportive of you staying and working late. But you deserve a fun night out. If you're friend-centered, your decision might be heavily influenced by whether or not you have friends going to the concert. Or alternatively, if you have really great friends at work who are also staying late, there's some FOMO if I don't join them. So think about the scenario where you would stand. What would your instinctive choice be? And I know this is nuanced, right? This is not a one size fits all response. Just think about that for you. And the point of this was to illustrate how fundamentally our centers affect our decisions and offer you an opportunity to do a personal audit, which again, a good coach can support you in this. But determine if your center actually might be limiting your personal effectiveness based on these unevaluated or unconscious centers. Again, those are just lenses. So what I was speaking or referencing about before is being a principle-centered person. And in doing so, you stand apart from the emotion of the situation and other factors that act on you and evaluate your options. Your principles are your reference points for decision-making. Ideally, we create one clear center from which we consistently derive a high degree of security, guidance, wisdom, and power, which in turn empowers our proactivity versus reactivity, giving congruency and harmony to every part of our lives. So by centering our lives on principles, we create this solid foundation for the development of these different life support factors. Now, principles are deep fundamental truths, and we start by looking at what are our core values, right? And those core values inform principles. They are reference points for decision making. They don't react to anything. They don't depend on that scene, the circumstances, like the behavior of others, the environment, what's the current fads are for their validity. And so by centering our lives on these timeless, unchanging principles, we create this fundamental paradigm for more effective living. It's the center that puts all the other centers in perspective, setting these standards for how you want to be. So ultimately, and back to this example, whether you go to the concert or stay and work, it's actually a small part of an effective decision. With a principle-centered paradigm, you're proactively choosing what you determine to be the best alternative. And that might change, right? That it may not be every single time this happens. But in this case, with your principles guiding you, you're proactively choosing what you determine to be best, how it contributes to your values in life. You're staying in integrity with those values. And you can clearly communicate to all parties with confidence and feel comfortable about your decision. Whatever you choose to do or focus on, you can enjoy it. You can be present. You can get that feeling that we're all seeking from the doing of anything that I mentioned. And that feeling is grounded in a core, it's secure, it's harmonious. So are there any questions about that? I mean, this was really the main point that I wanted to convey here, is to give you an opportunity to look at the power that you have to re-examine your thoughts and emotions, the reactivity to circumstances versus proactivity based on this principle-centered paradigm, which, by the way, I want to give credit. This is, if you've ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, this is something that he speaks a lot about, and it comes from that. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely read that book. It's a phenomenal, timeless book. Any questions about this? Comments?
You have a great comment in the chat that says this is daily work for the entire life. It's never done.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, if there's no questions for now, now that you have a better understanding of what's possible, I do want to share more about how a coaching process can help achieve this harmony. In the way that I work with my clients, I can't speak for all coaches, and there's so many different great coaches out there, by the way, so many different wonderful coaches. The way that I operate is through a 7-step process that blends the various sort of practical and mindful principles and tools like you've just seen. And we work to empower you. We empower you to up level. Again, you're already successful. You're already amazing humans. But what we do is find and remove the blocks, the mental blocks, the limiting beliefs, the subconscious patterning that I described. And we build the capacity to unleash your full creative potential so that you can maximize your impact in whatever areas of life are important to you, whatever roles you play that are your primary roles in life. Why does this matter? It matters so that you can achieve new outcomes rooted in actual transformation, not a quick fix. And that looks like alignment, where your thoughts, intentions, and actions are congruent with your intuition and your authentic desires. It looks like harmony, the theme of this whole conversation today, which is created by having and setting clear boundaries and focus on creating space and presence for purposeful action. And ultimately, this feeling of fulfillment or connection to an intentional path that serves a greater mission. Those are pretty great things, right? Something we're all looking for. I know I am. So I'll leave you with an invitation of possibility. What dreams or goals do you have for a more harmonious, fulfilled life? And what's stopping you? As I said, coaching can be a transformational modality to support this, to have someone hold space for you week over week. So if this sounds exciting for you, I do have 3 spots open for my 6-month coaching process. And we're always going to have an initial conversation where I share more details, but just at a high level, the framework that I employ provides a structured container for defining and addressing whatever it is that is your big agenda, your big dream, ensuring that you progress towards closing that gap between your current position and your aspirations for where you want to be in 6 months or a year, that true transformation. So you all know where to find me. You have my information here. You can reach out to Emery. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. But if you're interested, once you contact me, I'll send you a link to book time for a discovery conversation where we would evaluate if it's the right fit to partner on such an important journey. And if anything, I'd love to just have you all connect with me on LinkedIn, share ideas, conversation. I love that Emery community and staying connected to you all. So I so appreciate your time and attention today. I'd love to ask if there are any questions, comments. We have 2 more minutes left in our hour. Any feedback also is very welcome. What landed, what didn't land. Anyone? Any brave
Thank you
souls?
so much. Oh my gosh, great content. What's this? Oh, that was you. Any brave souls? So please, thank you guys so much for joining us today and participating. Those of you who were active on the chat, thank you for that. Please help me give Natalie a huge thank you for sharing her expertise with us. If you want to connect with Natalie, she's already shown you her contact information, her website, or her email. You will also receive an email following today's session with more information on how to connect with her, as well as other resources to take advantage of through Emory Alumni Association for career and personal development. You will also receive a link to complete a short survey following the event. So please, 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 like it takes a couple of minutes to do the survey, provide us your feedback, so we can share with the coaches and create more great webinars and content for you guys. And there, you might, you know, a few lucky survey takers might get a prize swag bag or something like that in the mail. So thank you again for joining us today, and you guys have a great afternoon.
You all again.